Do you ever feel like you just don't have the time to sit down and read the news every morning? Sometimes things get so hectic you can't even scroll through your feeds while you're trying to get ready. A new podcast from Boise State Public Radio has you covered. I'm George Prentice, and I want to invite you to check out The Connector every weekday morning. You can get up to speed on all of the Idaho news you need to start your day without ever interrupting your morning routine. All you have to do is hit play. That's The Connector from Boise State Public Radio. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. This is Idaho Matters. Every person has their own idea of what's important in life, basically a set of values that you live by. In fact, these differing values that help shape our community is also why listening to one another is so incredibly important. And that's exactly what Boise State Listens is inviting people to do next week, as 7 students share what they value and why. So joining us now to talk more about the upcoming event are Isaac Castellano, Associate Clinical Professor and Associate Director of the Institute for Advancing American Values, and Boise State students, Victoria Zunich, who is also an undergraduate fellow with the Institute, and Ethan Lahaug. I want to welcome all of you to the program.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gemma.
Isaac, let me start with you. Can you start out by telling us a little bit more about Boise State Listens and what student speakers will be sharing this year?
Yeah, thank you. Boise State Listens is an opportunity for students to respond to a prompt, what do you value and why? And the idea is part of our broader Idaho Listens program. We've been around the state, and our next event after Boise State Listens next Tuesday will be up in Salmon, Idaho in May. But the idea is to have folks from across campus or across society speak on what they value and why, and for the rest of us who are present to just simply listen. No Q&A, no applause, no back and forth. We are just there to absorb what folks are sharing with us.
So, Victoria, you will actually be speaking at next week's event. Can you talk to us a little bit, just give us kind of a quick preview of what you'll be talking about?
Yes, so I will be talking about my personal experience with race and how that's affected my family and how that's just the observations I've made in society. I think a lot of the speakers that I've seen have talked about a lot of personal stuff, so that can definitely be scary to share that with a large audience. But I think it's important to share that. So that's mostly the values I have are acknowledgement and family and just community and identity.
And Ethan, you've actually spoken at past Boise State Listens events. What was it like to take part in this experience?
Well, I can tell you it's an enormous growth opportunity for the people speaking. I went in and I had to connect. I actually thought for the first time about why do I think the things that I do? And so I had to think about my life experience, my past, and then the result was I was actually speaking alongside several students who I knew before, who I disagreed with politically. And I came out of it not agreeing with them. Like I didn't change my mind from the event, but I actually was like, oh, that makes a lot more sense why they believe the way that they do. So I think it was a really valuable experience for me.
Mm-hmm. Isaac, why do you think sharing differing values in a venue like this, where you really are listening and you're not debating, because it seems like this is what we all kind of fall into that trap sometimes, is that debate when we have differing views. So what would you say is so important about this concept?
Well, this event is really geared at generating empathy for our fellow citizens. And that empathy translates into respect, and that is just a core component of a functioning democracy. Without that mutual respect, we can't work together collectively to build a functioning society and democracy. And your listeners who listened on Tuesday heard Danielle Allen talk about these same themes. She was our distinguished lecture series speaker. And she, that evening, and I think also on the show, really articulated this as well. This mutual respect is a necessary ingredient for a functioning democracy. And when we don't know, when we don't listen, we fill in the blanks. We assume the worst of those with whom we disagree with. And this is just an opportunity to break some of those barriers down. And again, to Ethan's point, this is not about changing people's minds. It's about understanding.
Isn't that such a key thing, right? Is I think, Isaac, it feels like in this culture and climate we live in right now that it's almost like, well, we want to change someone's mind instead of maybe trying to understand why someone thinks and feels the way that they do. And I think this happens on both sides of the aisle. Do you see that as well?
No, we have a massive deficit of respect across the aisle, across the ideological spectrum in the United States. And we just need more opportunities to have these kinds of conversations. So this is just one of those, and open to the public, and everyone's invited to come. We'll have dessert after the speakers are done sharing, and there'll be room and time for conversation to come up and speak with some of the speakers and other audience members, to have some of those conversations. So really, a community event is how we've designed it.
Victoria, why was this something that you wanted to do this year? What was it that inspired you to say, you know what, I'm going to speak this year?
Yeah, great question. I think as Ethan pointed out, I'm looking forward to the growth opportunity. I first was introduced to the Institute through the Idaho Listens event in Caldwell. And when I went to that, it was just different than any type of event I went to. No one was debating, no one was questioning each other, questioning each other's experiences. We were all just coming together, and I met some very cool people. And then I went to Boise State Listens last semester, and I was just inspired by the range of different topics they had and speakers they had. And so I thought to myself, why not be one of them? Everybody has a story to share, and I want to share mine. And it's definitely challenging, but I was ultimately just inspired by the previous events that I've gone to and the previous speakers that I've seen.
Ethan, what has it been like for you to sit in on these discussions in the past? I mean, is it difficult to just sit and truly absorb and listen, in particular when there might be views that are not similar to yours?
Well, I think people might walk in thinking, oh, they know what the disagreement's going to be about. But you hear stories from students who are speaking who, like, you start at 1 minute, they end their speech 6 minutes later. I had no idea where it was going. I didn't know where they were starting, and they ended in a completely different place. And so by just listening, I think there are times when you feel a little terse. You're like, oh, that doesn't sit right with me. But because it's built on a foundation of that person's life story, you have that aspect, that commonality first, where they're a person first. And then you can hear about your disagreements or differences later. But you're okay with that because you already know, you understand them and you empathize with them before seeing them as your political opponent.
I think that's a really interesting perspective. And Isaac, I'm curious to know if you think that these listening sessions help people to find common ground, despite the fact that it does feel like we live in such divided times. But as Ethan just said, you look at the humanity first. So I wonder how much that makes a difference in regards to being willing to listen.
No, it's really profound experience to be in a room where you wouldn't otherwise be hearing out folks that you just don't cross paths with necessarily. And college campus is a little bit different since we have classrooms that are very diverse. And so there is a kind of a more of that here on campus than perhaps in broader society. But oftentimes we're not asking students to share openly their value systems. And so this is what Boise State Listens is able to do. The broader Idaho Listens has that same effect too. And so you come out of these events, and I've been to all of them really. So they're my favorite event, and you have this profound sense of respect and understanding about the people you are sharing this state and country with. And it's not all of the negative name calling stereotypes that we are normally exposed to.
And Isaac, before we let you go, can you tell us very quickly again what folks can expect attending the event, because it is open to the public?
To come and sit it's kind of an awkward thing. You can't applause till the very end, the very beginning and very end. But after each individual speaker, we ask the audience to remain silent and hold their applause. It's 7 p.m. in the Simplot Ballroom at Boise State Student Union Building. Free parking in the Lincoln Garage, and dessert and conversation to follow.
All right. I want to thank all of you so very much for coming in and talking with us about it. Really appreciate your time. We've been talking with Isaac Castellano, Associate Clinical Professor and Associate Director of the Institute for Advancing American Values at Boise State University, along with Boise State University students, Victoria Zunich, who is also an undergraduate fellow with the Institute, and Ethan Lohag. The event, as Isaac mentioned, is February 25th at 7 p.m. At the Boise State Student Union Building. And that'll do it for this episode of Idaho Matters. Thanks so much for listening. And just a reminder, you can find all of our episodes wherever you get your podcasts.
Each morning, it's a new opportunity, a chance to start fresh. Up First from NPR makes each morning an opportunity to learn and to understand. Choose to join the world every morning with Up First, a podcast that hands you everything going on across the globe and down the street, all in 15 minutes or less. Start your day informed and anew with Up First by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts.